You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
The unsettling story behind Trump's secret plan for a friendly takeover, based on an article by The Conversation, Cuba as cover, the left as target, the setup. The Trump administration has launched a new anti-Cuba offensive dressed up as counterterrorism. The State Department's nearly 100-page report tries to portray Havana as the nerve center of a half-century conspiracy linking espionage, terrorism, and the domestic left, with the Democratic Socialists of America shoved into the frame by association. That is the surface story. The real story is power who gets to define terrorism, who gets to weaponize state institutions, and who pays the price when a White House decides it needs an enemy it can morally flatter. Power is the point. The decision-makers are not hiding in the footnotes. Marco Rubio is convening the ideological machinery. Trump is amplifying it. The State Department is publishing the dossier. Together they are turning executive power into a propaganda pipeline. This is not analysis. It is pretext-making. The administration is not merely accusing Cuba of subversion. It is constructing a political permission structure for escalation. Once a foreign government is recast as the incubator of domestic radicalism, sanctions stop looking like punishment and start looking like restraint. Military action stops sounding reckless and starts sounding necessary. This direction by design. The report does what these campaigns always do. It drags genuine cases of espionage and violence into the same net as ordinary political speech. A trip to Cuba, solidarity with Havana, or opposition to the embargo gets folded into the same category as terrorism. That is not rigor. It is guilt by association as state doctrine. The purpose is obvious. If the administration can make left politics feel adjacent to espionage, then it can smear unions, anti-war activists, and Democratic Socialists without having to prove anything about them. The line from Cuba helped radicalize Americans to your domestic opponents or foreign-line extremists is exactly the kind of line a state uses when it wants repression to feel administrative. What gets erased? The report's silence is as revealing as its allegations. It leaves out 6 decades of documented U.S. covert action against Cuba, including assassination plots and support for armed exile groups. That omission is not incidental. It is the mechanism that keeps imperial violence off the page while portraying Cuban defense as original sin. The same pattern appears in the administration's broader counterterrorism posture. In May, the White House named violent left-wing extremists as one of 3 terror threats, while omitting neo-Nazi and other far-right groups. That is not an oversight. It is a political choice about where the state wants public fear to land. Domestic uses, foreign targets. The Cuba campaign does double duty. Abroad, it justifies intensified economic warfare, sanctions, and the threat of friendly takeover fantasies that sit uncomfortably close to open coercion. At home, it gives Republicans a fresh way to frame Democrats, and the left as agents of foreign menace. But timing matters. The source itself points to 2 converging motives: a search for foreign policy victory after the Iran war and midterm politics. In other words, this is part grievance theater, part electoral positioning, and part preparation for more aggressive action. The Cuban people are being used as collateral in a domestic messaging operation. The pattern. This is the old U.S. playbook with updated branding. Isolate a target, exaggerate the threat, erase the history of American violence, and then convert the resulting panic into executive power. The administration is not confused about this. It is running the sequence on purpose. What the story reveals is not a sudden concern about Cuba. It is the willingness of a ruling coalition to manufacture foreign menace in order to discipline domestic dissent. That is the underlying structure: empire abroad, smearing at home, and state violence presented as common sense. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Norman, thanks for listening.